Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Please bear with us for a couple of seconds while we let everyone come in from the waiting room. Just a moment more. All right, well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the Program on Education Policy and Governance Colloquium Series for the fall. We are delighted that you are with us today. We have a great set of research for you to ponder and ask questions about. We have with us today our program director, Professor Paul Peterson, Henry Lee Shattuck Professor of Government at Harvard, and Danny Shakeel, one of our postdoctoral research fellows. Before we turn it over to our guests, let me ask that everyone please use the question and answer panel to ask your questions. Please feel free to ask those questions at any point in time. We will run through the presentation today before turning to those questions, but we will get to you. So please feel free. Paul?
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Danny Shakeel and I have prepared a paper which compares charter schools and district schools trends over time. And so to efficiently share that information with you, I'm going to share my slide and bring up a PowerPoint. And I think you can all see it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So Danny did the heavy lifting on this, Danny Shakeel, and he's going to present the results. I'm going to just present some of the setup to give you the framework within which this study develops. So if I can get my slide to move here, we can go forward. Yeah. So the motivation for this is the fact that the charter school sector grew rapidly in the 21st century. From 2005 to 2017, it increased from 2% to 6% of all public school enrollments, nearly threefold increase. But recently, it's come under heavy criticism. And in the 2020 national platform of the Democratic Party, there is a statement that says that in the future, charter schools are going to need stringent guardrails to ensure that they are good stewards, and says that funding for charters must be conditioned on whether the charter will systematically serve the neediest students. So have charters failed to be good stewards? Is charter school performance relative to district schools deteriorating over time? As it has expanded, has it deteriorated? And especially, what are the trends for ethnic minorities and for low SES students? So that's the motivation. Now, we're not giving you a mystery story here. We're going to tell you the answer right at the beginning. We find that charter school sector is improving at a faster rate than the district sector. And that's especially true for African Americans, especially those in 8th grade in math. But it's all across the board, especially for students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So the conventional wisdom on this topic is that the charter sector isn't much better than the district sector. These are 3 studies that have looked at the range of data. They gather together all the information that's out there, and all 3 of them come to the conclusion that flip a coin, there's not much difference between a charter school and the district school the student might have gone to had they not had the charter option. But most of these studies, in fact, virtually all of these studies, look at a few schools or at a state or maybe even more than that, but only at a single point in time. They're sort of saying, how do charter schools look as compared to district schools? And a lot of these studies are aging. They were conducted quite some years ago. There are only two trend studies out there. One is by an organization known as Credo, which has looked at charter school trends in 16 states over the 4-year period, 2009 to 2013. So like I say, a lot of this is from some years ago. And they find some improvement over that 4-year period, but that's just 16 states and that's just a 4-year period. And then in Texas, there's another study that finds improvement over a 10-year period, but that's just for the state of Texas. So what we offer today is a nationwide study using the National Assessment of Educational Progress data that looks at the trends in the charter sector and the district sector over the 12-year period, 2005 to 2017. We wish we could bring you down closer to the present, but the data has not been released by the US Department of Education that would allow for that. So the data that we're using is this NAEP data, the famous national report card that is been collected every other year for many years. 2019 data has not been released. It doesn't look like they're going to be doing it in 2021, but over the time period that we're focusing on, we have information every other year for 4th and 8th grade math and reading. And it all amounts to about 4 million tests out there, lots of tests just for the district students, and then another 140,000 for the charter students. So it's a massive data set, and Danny Shakeel has to take the credit for doing and coming up with the computer programming that allowed for this massive analysis that we have brought together in this paper. So we have a representative sample for the nation as a whole and for each state. And we have information on the background characteristics of the student. We know their ethnicity, gender, their eligibility for free and reduced lunch. And for 8th grade students, we have additional information about parental education, computer availability in the home, number of books in the home, which we use as measures of the student's socioeconomic status. We don't use program information as to say eligibility for special education and English language learner status, because we think the criteria that are used in the district sector differ from the criteria used in the charter sector. So we don't use that information, but we did run a robustness check and nothing really changed in any significant way once we did that. We could have done that just as well, but that's not what we did. So we're going to report our results in standard deviations, and just to help you understand the results, I want to emphasize that a standard deviation is a lot. The average difference between the students in 4th grade and 8th grade on these tests, and there's a way of looking at that. The NAEP has organized their data, so you can actually say, how would the 8th grade student have done if they had taken the 4th grade tests? And they would have done, on average, 1.23 standard deviations better. So that means that about a 0.31 standard deviation equals 1 year's worth of learning or 9 months worth of learning. And so these other numbers I have here are just sort of calculations based off that fundamental calculation. So think of 1/3 of a standard deviation as approximately 1 year's worth of learning, 0.3 or 0.31. So Danny, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you can report these results.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to present the results. So in this slide, we are looking at the overall gain made by the cohorts in 12 years in each sector in math and reading for grade 4 and grade 8. I must reemphasize that we are not tracking individual students over time. So these are cohort gains. On the y-axis, we have the results in standard deviation. So we have two sectors here. There is district is represented by the blue color and charter is represented by the pink color. If you look at, for example, grade 4 reading, the gains made by the cohorts in charter sector are almost a quarter standard deviation, 0.26. In comparison, the gains made by cohorts in the district sector over this 12 years is 0.19 standard deviation. So we see larger gains for the charter sector. The gains are more clear if we look at grade 8 mathematics. There we see a gain for the charter cohorts equivalent to 0.42 standard deviation. The comparison gain for district cohorts is half, only 0.22 standard deviation. So this particular graph shows that overall there is an accelerated achievement for the trends in the charter schools. How much are these gains? So if we look for the effects in grade 8 mathematics, differences in gains between two sectors amount to 6 months worth of additional learning for charter cohorts. The same number in 8th grade reading means 2 months worth of additional learning for charter cohorts. In grade 4 math and reading, the difference in learning between two sectors in 12 years is 2 months worth of learning. These are quite big gains. If we break our analysis by ethnicity, we see that for African Americans on the left side, the gains are quite large. So let's look at grade 8 mathematics. There we see the overall gains made by students from African American background in charter schools is 0.52 standard deviation, a half standard deviation over this 12-year time period. The comparison gain for African Americans in district schools is 0.22 standard deviation, less than half. The gains are particularly large in grade 8. In reading, we find similar results, although the magnitude is not as large as mathematics. If you look at white Americans on the right-hand side of the graph, we see that the gains for white Americans are comparable to African Americans, although smaller in magnitude. For example, in grade 8 mathematics, the gains made by charter cohorts are 0.35 standard deviation. Again, the gain for district cohorts is less than half in magnitude, and it amounts to 0.16 standard deviation. So from this graph, we see larger gains for African Americans than whites. And the gains are larger in charter sector than in district sector. These numbers again amount, for example, in 8th grade mathematics, to 1 year's worth of additional learning in the charter schools in comparison to district schools. In the 8th grade reading, there is 3 months worth of additional learning for African Americans in charter schools as compared to district schools. For 4th grade math and reading, the African American gain differences amount to 3 to 4 months worth of additional learning in charter schools. The next two groups are Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans. For these two groups, we find mixed evidence, and the evidence is not very clear in the favor of charter sector. We find that a charter sector has an advantage, for example, in grade 4 mathematics for Hispanics, also in reading grade 4, but there's a district advantage in grade 8 mathematics for Hispanics. We see a similar picture for Asian Americans. After ethnicity, we look at the results for the socioeconomic status. To look at the results, we divide the data into quartiles. So we look at the top quartile of the SES distribution and also the bottom quartile. On the left, we have the top quartile. Within the top quartile, the gains made by charter cohorts in mathematics, and this is only for grade 8 because the SES data is not reported for grade 4. In grade 8, we see an overall gain of 0.21 standard deviation for mathematics in charter sector. The gains for district cohorts is only 0.05 standard deviation, 4 times less. If we compare the top quartile to the bottom quartile, we see larger gains in the bottom quartile. So on the right half, we see the bottom quartile where The gains in mathematics in charter are half standard deviation, quite large. The comparison gain in district sector are less than half, again 0.21 standard deviation. This graph tells us that there are larger gains in the bottom quartile than in the top quartile. Next, we look at the results by region of the country. The region are Northeast, Midwest, South, and West. First, we look at Northeast, which is on the left side. Here we see there are particularly large gain in the charter sector. For example, in mathematics in grade 8, we find the overall gains in charter sector are 0.57 standard deviation. They are much less for the district sector, and they amount to 0.17 standard deviation. In grade 4 mathematics, the differences are 0.29 standard deviation and 0.04 standard deviation, almost a quarter standard deviation difference. On the right side of the graph, we see the gains for Midwest. Here we see some evidence for grade 8. In mathematics, there's a difference where charter sector gains are half standard deviation and the gains in district sector are 0.17 standard deviation. We do not see much larger evidence in grade 4. This particular graph tells us that the gains are particularly visible in the northeast part of the country. The next graph shows us south and west part of the country. Here we see some charter advantage in the south part of the country. We see larger gains for the charter sector and smaller gains for the district sector in grade 4, grade 8, and in math and reading. However, in the west part of the country, we do not see a clear picture. There is mixed evidence. For example, there's a district advantage in grade 8 reading, but there's a slight charter advantage in grade 4 reading. And these differences are not large. We next look at the results by locale. Now this data is available only starting in 2007. These are therefore 10 years of gain, not 12 years of gain. The definition of locale is in alignment with the US Census. On the left, we look at the gains for city. Here we see particular large gains made by charter sector in reading in grade 4. They amount to 0.32 standard deviation. The comparable gains for district cohorts are again less than half, 0.12 standard deviation. We see a charter advantage in the cities, particularly in grade 4. If we look in the suburb part of the country, we do not see a charter advantage at grade 4. In fact, there's a district advantage. The gains made by the district sector are quite large in comparison to the gains made by the charter sector. However, in grade 8, in the suburbs, we see the gains are larger for charter sector than for the district sector. For example, in mathematics, the gains made by charters are 0.22 standard deviation. The gains made by district schools are only 0.13 standard deviation. So what does our study tell overall? First, we see that both sectors are improving, which is good. The gains are seen for both sectors for this 12-year time period between 2005 and 2017. But the gains for cohorts made by charter students are approximately twofold as the gains made by cohorts in the district sector. This is the first takeaway. Then if we look at the subgroup analysis, we see that the gains are particularly large for African-American students. And we also see that the gains are larger for the lower SES quartile than the gains made by students in the top SES quartile. In the analysis by region, we found that the gains are particularly visible by students attending in the schools in the northeast part of the country. The gains are particularly concentrated in that region. Our analysis shows a gain in charters for African Americans and low SES students. Therefore, the evidence tells us that charters seem to have been good stewards. Our analysis also says that it is unlikely that the slowdown in the sector's growth is because of a decline in their productivity. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Danny and Paul, for this presentation. If I could open up the questions to everyone who is with us today, but let me start perhaps by asking Professor Peterson to put this research into context with what we already know. What's the biggest takeaway from your research? This is quite a lot of data, and I can't imagine this has been done before.
Well, it is new information. The National Assessment of Educational Progress has been reporting out this information over the years, but nobody's really taken a deep dive into it because it's a massive job, as Danny can testify. So that's I think a very important takeaway, is that this is a brand new analysis of a data set that's highly respected and is available nationwide. There was a study of NAEP back in 2005 or 2006 that got a lot of headlines, and it said, well, there really isn't much difference between the two sectors. And back in 2005, 2006, there wasn't much difference between the two sectors. So this doesn't really actually, though, compare the two sectors at any one point in time. It just says, okay, given where they were back in 2005, how much has one sector or both sectors improved over time? And both sectors have improved over time. It's not like we show that the district sector has gotten worse over time. It's actually gotten better. So I'd say the big takeaway is what Danny said there, that the gains in the charter sector are twice as large as those in the district sector. And the second one, of course, is the much bigger gains for African Americans, which is a population that has been especially of interest to many people in recent years.
This is very interesting. Well, let's turn to some of the questions that are now starting to populate the Q&A panel, and I invite others to do the same. Li-Fei Huang, if you could unmute yourself and pose the question to our guests.
Thank you, Professor Paul. And my question is whether you can briefly explain some of the reasons why charter schools outperform district-run schools so much. Is it because their autonomy to use innovative methods, or like will extended learning play a role there, or will discipline play a role? Thank you.
Danny, do you have a response to that?
We do not look at any moderating variables, so it will be speculation in my opinion, but I think charters are designed to serve the needy students, and it seems that the model works best. I don't know which model works best, but they seem to do pretty well.
So to add to that point, and it is speculation, as Annie says, but other studies have shown that the charter sector improvement, well, the Credo study shows that, and the Texas study that I cited at the beginning, both show that improvement seems to be due to the fact that the weak charter schools end up being closed. Maybe they don't sustain their enrollment, or maybe the authorizer decides they're not effective and they should be shut down. And the new ones that open up seem to be of higher quality than the ones that were opening up back in the earlier period. So it's not like we see, or they say, we don't really have any direct data on this, but others seem to say that it's not like any one charter school is getting better over time. We have no really strong evidence for that, but it's more likely that the sector is improving because the weak ones are being weeded out more quickly than in the district sector.
Thank you, Paul. Tom Palmer, would you like to follow up on this question with your own?
If I read it correctly, I believe the gains of charter schools over district schools was not as great in the West. And I just wondered if you have any general comments about why that is. Are the charter schools not as good in the West, or are the public schools better? Thank you.
All right, Danny, I'm going to give that tough question to you.
Well, again, it will be a speculation, I would say. So in the northeast part of the country, I think there are differences in population, the students' characteristics and their background. So For example, there are more Hispanics in the west part of the country than in the Northeast, I would say. So I think the charter designs are different, probably. Yeah, I think we are going to test that analysis in more detail.
So I think to answer that question, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen if I can. And let me see if I can go to the West. And in the West, it's not like the charter schools aren't showing some pretty good improvement there. The charter schools in the West are actually improving at as good a rate as they are in the Northeast, except for the math, unbelievably large math gains. I mean, that's a half a standard deviation is like a year and a half's worth of learning. So that's sort of an outlier there. But apart from that, the charter schools in the West are showing improvement gains of about, 2/3 of a year's worth of learning. So it's not bad, but the district schools are showing just as well. Whereas in the Northeast, the district schools are looking pretty bad. I'm not bad, not terrible in the sense that they're going in a minus direction, as I'm afraid we might be finding right now with COVID. But so you're seeing gains there in the district sector, but they're pretty modest and they're more substantial in the West. So the differences between the charter and the district school in the West sort of disappear because the district schools are keeping pace with the charters. And so it's sort of, you could say it's a good news story in the West. Now, why is that? My take on this is that it's related to the finding that we showed earlier for Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans, where we show that, and this is another good news story, that the Hispanic Americans are improving fairly substantially in both sectors. So this is a population which, despite all of the controversy over immigration, it looks like the Hispanic American community is making more rapid progress than white Americans. See, here's the white American data, which is, showing up at around 0.2 or maybe a little less, whereas the Hispanic data is going up as high as 0.25, 0.3. It's not a big difference, but Hispanic Americans are looking pretty good in the district sector, as well as, and of course, Asian Americans are making the biggest gains of any group in the country. And that's pretty well known. That's nothing special to our finding. So the charter advantage is particularly great where the district sector seems to be not doing well. And that's in the Northeast, and that's among African Americans, and that's among low-income students.
Thank you, Paul. We have another question from Brittany. Brittany Whitney, would you like to join us and ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the presentation this afternoon. I was wondering if you could speculate a little bit about why you think that the gains in the charter schools are significantly pronounced in 8th grade math as compared to the 4th grade gains and the 8th grade reading.
Well, Danny might have his own thoughts on that. I have some, I've noticed this in lots of different data sets that I've been looking at. And it seems like district schools, school districts, the standard traditional public school is performing reasonably well at the elementary school level. But it's at the secondary school level where you see less improvement in student performance over time. And at the high school level, graduation age 17, you don't see any improvement over time. So you see rather steep improvements in the public school system among people at age 9 or in grade 4. You see no improvement at age 17 or in high school. and eighth graders are somewhere in the middle. And so, so then the charters show up as showing, substantial improvement and at the eighth grade level. And then it stands out as being something really significant because the district schools are fading at that level. So what is it about early adolescence that makes it difficult for district schools to operate? It's speculation. You could say that the rules and regulations under which districts must operate make it very difficult for them to teach students once they reach their adolescent years. And charter schools are freed up from those rules and can organize their schools in such a way as to make them a better learning opportunity, to provide better learning opportunities for students. And the charters have learned how to do that with increasing skill over time.
Sure. We see similar results in the Batts and Tang meta-analysis that charters do better in mathematics than in reading for grade 8 level. So I think Paul is right in the speculation that the district schools struggle as the children reach adolescence, but the answer could also be because of teacher quality. I don't know of a study which has looked at the teacher quality difference by grades, but I think there's an opportunity to explore that.
Yes, and then another way of commenting on that is to point out that the COVID data that's just come out this week says that the student loss is the greatest in math and less so in reading, which suggests to me that you're taught math in school. And if you're not taught math in school, you're not going to learn math. And that would suggest then that the quality of instruction in the school is particularly important for the acquisition of mathematics skills.
Well, thank you, Paul and Danny. I think the
Are there some questions in the chat function?
No, there are just some clarifications and some comments from us.
Okay.
But it does seem like this is an incredibly important study. The amount of data that you guys have been able to sort of wrap your arms around is phenomenal. Could you say something about some related work that you have done, Paul, on polling and on COVID, and what you expect we will be able to see once we have more data to add to this? What are the results?
Well, the COVID data that we do have already is from last spring, where the Education Next survey was administered to parents in all three sectors, the private sector and the charter sector and the district sector. And we found that parents of students in the private and charter sectors were reporting higher levels of regular contact with the teacher even after the schools had closed than was the case in the district schools. The charter and private schools seem more nimble, more able to refashion their learning framework when they had to move from the in-classroom platform to the online platform, which I think makes only sense since they're smaller organizations. They can adapt more quickly. They have fewer resources. You could say maybe, with fewer resources, they would find it more difficult to adapt, but probably the organizational structure of the private and charter sector facilitated that change. Now that was last spring. What we don't know is what happened this fall. Maybe the district schools over the summer had enough time to reorganize themselves so that even though a lot of them are teaching online, they're going to do a lot better this fall at meeting the needs of students than the charter and private sectors. So we're going back into the field. Education Next is in the field now. We're just stopping data collection today, literally today, and we are going to have results hopefully before the end of December. So we are looking forward to seeing what we can learn about the three sectors, the private and the charter and the district sector this fall.
Well, that will be quite interesting to see once we have it, and perhaps we can start our spring colloquia series early, maybe with something in January as we start the semester in February. I think we're at a point where we've answered all the questions that people have been willing to sort of toss out to us. If we could maybe close by just asking you, what do you think the research that you presented today may have as far as policy implications? We have a new administration coming in. COVID is continuing to, at least the media tells us, to get worse. Where do we go from here with what we know?
Well, Danny, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think given the clear advantage for the disadvantaged students, that is the ethnic minorities and the low SES, the charter sector should have a larger role to play in helping those kids with the evidence that they have put forth.
You know, my comment on that is that I think the risk to the charter sector is that they may be getting better, that that's actually a risk factor. You would ordinarily think that any product out there that if it's improving over time, that's got to be only good news for the product. But, you know, in the case of educations, the decisions made about growth are political decisions. They're not market decisions. There's some market decisions. That is to say, parents have to demand a charter school education if the sector is going to expand. But and we know that parents are, because the amount of demand for charter schools continues to be out there. There's a lot of parents who would like to send their children to charter schools, and the size of the sector isn't large enough to accommodate the demand. So you would think there would be growth if you went simply by parent demand for charters. But you can't grow if you're not allowed to build new schools. And it's become increasingly difficult to get authorization. So the political pressures on the charters have intensified over time, maybe because the charters are posing an increasing threat to schools. So, and I think the pressures on the charters are particularly intense in the Northeast. We see it in Massachusetts, we see it in Boston, New York City. We see it in Newark. We see it, you know, all up and down the East Coast. And in the West, in the mountain states in particular, there isn't the same opposition. Now, you would say, okay, so where the charters are improving the most is exactly where the pressure to contain them is the greatest. And that might be because they pose a greater threat to the district schools in the northeastern part of the country.
Well, thank you very much for those thoughts. And thank you very much for your presentation today. If we have no more questions, which I don't see any, I think we can adjourn today. Thank you again, everyone, for being with us. We appreciate your time. The Colloquium Series now concludes this fall, and we will start up again in the spring. We will reach out to each of you as we have in the past, and of course on the program's website. You will start seeing the schedule as soon as we can post it in early January to mid-month. Again, thank you both for your presentation, and thank you everyone for being with us. Have a good afternoon and take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you, James.